this last segment of the show for today. We're talking to Alana McLaughlin, and she's given us some information in reference to slavery, the Civil War amendments, and human trafficking. And she's already given us quite a bit of information concerning the Civil War amendments, the 13th, 14th, and the 15th amendments to the Constitution, as well as some statements in reference to slavery. And now I think it is time, Alana, for you to speak to this important issue of slavery and human trafficking, the difference between what you have considered to be slavery and human trafficking.
Okay, slavery and human trafficking. Human trafficking is almost like, okay, say slavery was a genre. Human trafficking would be a subgenre, the genre that was born out of a genre. Slavery, well, human trafficking is like an aspect of slavery. It's like slavery makes more aspects of slavery. There comes human trafficking and a whole bunch of other stuff. So let's talk about human trafficking. It's where, but the human trafficking, the difference between, there's a big difference. Slavery was mainly involved with African Americans. Human trafficking is more common with other races than African Americans. So now it happens, human trafficking happens everywhere. It happens in Asia or Europe or Canada, anywhere. And so basically, when you say human trafficking, it's the art, it's the fact where you could be sold for exploitation, or you could be sold like a slave. And so it does all things that slavery did, but it's much more gruesome now that they have more now, because back then they had guns and whips and other methods of torture, but nowadays they have even more. So being trafficked is even more painful nowadays because they have more arts of torture, they have more kinds of guns, more kinds of whips, more kinds of everything.
And so in a real sense, what you're saying is that human trafficking, and I think you've identified it as being all over the world and et cetera, is the exploitation of people. Is that what you're saying? And I think you gave us at one time some information in reference to substance abuse and drugs and et cetera, that is also a part of human trafficking and somehow keeps people involved, keeps them tied into terrible situations. Is that what we're saying?
Yes. Now, prostitution. When you're being trafficked, you could be forced to be a prostitute or a slave or anything. You could be basically anything. You could just be there to be tortured. And I think that's one of the main reasons that there are so much kidnapping nowadays and killing, because you have to be kidnapped to be turned into an indentured slave or a prostitute, because it has to pick you up from where you are and take you somewhere else and put you through all these horrible methods of torture, and that's basically human trafficking, where you're forced to do things that most people wouldn't make other people do, and you're forced to do horrible, horrible things.
And Lana, tell me, for the benefit of the audience as well, where do you get your information in reference to human trafficking, and why would you decide to deal with this particular topic? Where did your information come from, and why do you want to deal with this kind of information?
Well, see, I was on Wikipedia reading up about slavery, and then I also had books reading about slavery, and then in all those books and all those Wikipedia pages, all those internet pages, I saw one thing that really stood out. In big letters, it said human trafficking, and it always would reference human trafficking. And so I decided to click on human trafficking and see what this thing was, because I'd heard about it, but I didn't really think much of it because I didn't really know what it was about. And when I looked into it, I just thought, wow, people have to go through this, and most people don't even live to tell their story about it. Only some lucky people get to be able to live and tell their story about it, and sometimes those stories are even lost. So most people don't even know about human trafficking because it happens in the dark. Nobody goes around telling people about it. You don't see it, but it happens, and so that's why most people don't really know about it. And that's maybe why I don't know about it.
And so, in a real sense, you are now on a campaign, and you've always been on a campaign against slavery in favor of emancipation and et cetera, but you're now on a campaign in order to help people who might be caught up in human trafficking. What would you say about a typical person that might be caught up in human trafficking? Who is impacted by this? Females or males or what? Who?
Mainly females, but then there are also males. I mean, because I don't believe that it would only happen to females. So it happens to everybody, little girls, little boys, grown men, grown women. And so it's mainly, I think the biggest kind of population would be kids and teens, like I'd say 9 through 17. That's the biggest area in which, because that's when you're kind of growing up a little bit, and that's where they think that they were like, oh, let's steal her, let's traffic her or him. And so that's kind of the biggest population, and it happens to everybody. It's not just a certain race that it happens to, because it can't happen to one race and not happen to another. It happens to every race, African Americans, Caucasians, Asians, everybody.
And so now, Alana, you think that people ought to be more aware of this very, very fact of human trafficking, that as abolitionists opposed slavery at an earlier period, you think that people ought to be more aware. You said that you were not aware of it. You think that more information ought to be provided in schools and whatever in terms of the possibilities of human trafficking?
Now, in schools, I think there should be more books in the library about it, but I think they shouldn't really start feeding you information about that until like 6th grade and up, because that's kind of when you sort of matured. Yeah, like you're 11 and up or 10 and up. And like in elementary school, if you start feeding elementary school like a 1st grader that kind of information, that scars them for life. I mean, that gives them nightmares. That makes them scared to go outside because they think, oh, well, we're going to be kidnapped and trafficked. And there are really, really very dark aspects of it, and that's not really fit for like a 1st grader or a 2nd grader and all. So once you get like to middle school, like late middle school, that's when you should probably start learning about it, because that's when you won't be as terrified of it. Now, I'm not saying you won't be terrified, but I mean, you might not, but you wouldn't be as terrified as a 1st grader would.
So you think that more information and more people ought to become involved in trying to help individuals?
Yes.
Sometimes you see people who've been kidnapped, and you see messages all over and et cetera. And so people ought to be more concerned about this as one aspect of our daily lives and our existence, et cetera,
yes,
to help folks?
Because, I mean, I think that not older, but like 10 and up kids will kind of react to it more, because, I mean, if I react to it with a sad face, like if I'm not having nightmares about it and if I'm still involved in trying to stop it, then other kids could do that. I mean, because I'm a 5-foot, small, scrawny, no muscle little girl in middle school, in 6th grade, and all these 8th graders with big muscles and on the softball team and all that, they could make campaigns about it and raise awareness for it. I mean, if I can, then they definitely can.
And you think that more ought to be done in reference to trying to help folks who get caught up in these kinds of situations?
Yes, because everybody deserves justice, and it's sad that most people don't know about this, so most people can't help.
But you're on a campaign now to deal with what you might call trafficking, and so you believe that all people should have an opportunity to break away from these kinds of situations that they find themselves in?
Everybody deserves a chance to get away from it. Everybody deserves a chance to be able to just be able to walk away from it. And I mean, just like substance abuse, everybody deserves a chance to be able to get help for it, and that's just it.
Very good. And of course, Alana, let me thank you by doing this last few seconds in reference to some of the things that you've talked about, and I think our audience really appreciates the information that you've given us in reference to slavery, human trafficking, and the Civil War amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution. And of course, let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments.
Thank you and good morning.